Now we're live. I see it.
Does it say it? Okay, all right.
Yeah.
Okay, so we are live streaming. Let me see. Well, who are we missing?
So Maria Burnett.
Tyson, we're missing Tyson.
Tyson, we're missing.
Stacy.
Mm-hmm.
And Tim and Maria. So I don't know, Madam Chair, do you want me to go ahead and just kick things off?
Why don't we go ahead and start, and then we can send them, if you want in a bit, send an email just to see if.
Oh, here comes Stacy.
Oh, okay.
All right. We'll let her get spooled up, and then I'll go ahead and kick things off here.
Hi, Stacy.
Still connecting. Okay. Can you hear us, Stacy? Not quite yet. Oh, and here's Maria. Okay, Stacy, hello, how you doing? Can you hear us?
Yes, I can. Hi. My dog is barking already.
Timing is everything in life.
I have my mute on because my cat is purring so loud.
We'll all be using mute, all of us that have animals, that's for sure. Hi, Maria.
Yeah.
Okay, so we've got Stacy and Maria. So we're just missing Tyson and Tim. But we'll go ahead and begin. My name is Tim Nelson. I'm the Director of Land Services for Cook County, Minnesota, and I'm just going to do a little quick introductory and then pass it over to the committee chair, who is Cook County Commissioner Ann Sullivan. And I just wanted to explain a couple things. This is actually an advisory committee. This is a kickoff meeting. And we'll go over, if you look at the agenda, item number 3 is the purpose and timeline of the committee, and I can get a little bit more in depth into that. But from just a basic standpoint, this is an advisory committee, and these are public meetings that we're having. These aren't public hearings; they're public meetings. We are live streaming these over the YouTube live stream function on the Cook County website, so everybody will have a chance to see that. And we'll be talking later about how we can gain the most amount of public input and participation in, and opportunities for public comments and such like that in a little bit. The makeup of the committee, I know there's been questions. There's a lot of people that have wanted to be on the committee. We had 21 applicants, and there's been different questions from different folks as to, hey, why is the committee made up the way that it is? And it basically is just kind of trying to gain as much balance as possible. It was really difficult, I know, for the review and selection recommendation team that looked at the applications, and then also the Board of Commissioners that looked at them, because they were all strong applications, and certainly everybody deserves their opportunity to provide the public input as much as possible. Some of the questions too is about, well, why is the city included? It's not part of city jurisdiction. They're slightly down the road and such, but in our earlier discussions that we had with this, the city has always been involved in terms of discussions of if there are services or management of requirements for that site, would we accomplish them as the county, or would the city, we would be able to contract maybe with the city to be able to provide a certain level of service to go out there and do that. So we just wanted to have their input into this committee process as well. And certainly Kelly Swearingen has been a part of the discussion right from the get-go on that as well. So we know there's a lot of passions surrounding this piece of property and a lot of emotion that can come up. And so, we tried to do the best possible in terms of the selection, makeup and recommendation to the board, and have ended up, I think, with a pretty good balanced representation. And in a little bit too, we'll be talking about the purpose and the timeline. But I guess at this point, I'll just go ahead and turn it over to the Chair, Commissioner Ann Sullivan.
Thank you, Tim. I wanted to just spend some time at the initial meeting to get to know everyone. And so we can find out a little bit about our background and experiences. And maybe if each of us can state our name and why we applied for the committee. So I'll kind of model that for everybody. I'm Ann Sullivan, County Commissioner, and I really wanted to be a part of this group because of my passion around education. I was a social studies teacher, a history teacher. And I remember years back teaching sixth graders and using a curriculum that the Minnesota Historical Society had put together called Northern Lights. And it was one of the first curriculums I had ever seen that utilized true, authentic Indigenous history. And there were photographs and treaties and maps and stories that people told that brought history of Minnesota alive to my students. And that really committed me to learning the real history about Minnesota and about educating the public. And I really think this is an opportunity as we look at this parcel to educate ourselves and to learn more about this parcel and educate the broader public as to its significance and history, and for the opportunity that we have with this property. Thanks. Let's go in alphabetical order. Since I'm a teacher, I like that. We'll go with Maria Burnett next. Maria. So Maria, can you unmute and share your name and why you're part of this committee?
And for the opportunity that we have with this property. Thanks. Let's go in alphabetical order. Since I'm a teacher, I like that. We'll go with Maria Burnett next. Maria. So Maria, can you unmute and share your name and why you're part of this committee? And for the opportunity. Let's go in alphabetical order. We'll go with Maria Burnett next.
I think someone has the live stream on in their background.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. We've got a loop kind of going, and I think there's
Maria, can you unmute?
Yeah.
Your name and why you're part of this committee?
Let's everybody turn off their mics and see. So it looks like Maria left us. Maybe she's trying to get back. So let's move on to Myron Bersheim. Myron.
Okay, hi, good evening. I'm Myron Bersheim. I'm basically here as a representative of the Historical Society, Cook County Historical Society. I serve as vice president. Before that, as county commissioner, I was the county representative of the Historical Society. So we started having conversations about this property, Rena Rogers and I, some time ago. And I know we talked to Stacy and Dave Homiak as well in that process. So had a little interest in it, and my background too is history, and especially of Indigenous people in our state, and definitely representing the Historical Society. We have a church there, and we have Chippewa City representing that area. So that's basically my purpose for being here, is to see if things proceed, how the Historical Society could cooperate or work with or give proper recognition to this area.
Thank you very much, Myron. I see that Maria has joined us. So Maria, do you want to introduce yourself and explain why you'd like to be on this committee?
Thank you. I had to switch computers, so I'm sorry about that. It's Maria Burnett. I am the Education Director for the Grand Portage Band of Lake Superior, Chippewa. I am married to Jason Burnett, who is a direct descendant of John Bear Grease. So he has a connection to Chippewa City, and he has a connection to St. Francis Xavier Church. So I decided I would take his place since he's busy with other committees up here on the reservation. And I am also a social studies and an English teacher, or was, but I taught in Michigan for several years before we moved back here to the reservation. And now I work with the kids, and I just learned about the Passion Pit. I didn't know that area existed until Ann was telling me about it. So I would like to learn more, but also I believe it's important that our kids and students at Cook County High School know that this area exists, and they need to know the cultural history and the significance of it. And I want to make sure that it stays intact and people do the land acknowledgement of the Anishinaabe that have been here for centuries. So that's why I decided to join.
Thank you very much. Stacy.
Bonjour, Anin. Hello, I'm Stacy Drewillard. I'm a Chippewa City descendant via the Anaquat family. And the Anaquat family was the first official landowner at Chippewa City. And I've interviewed Anishinaabe elders about the history of Chippewa City, particularly for the book Walking the Old Road. The old road goes right along the beach properties that we're here to discuss. So I'm happy to be a part of the conversation and have a lot of interest in history and making sure that the beach is honored and the Anishinaabe ancestors are honored who once walked along that old road. So that's why I applied.
Thank you, Stacy. Margaret.
Doesn't John go first? Oh, Pat. Well, I'll go. I was a good student and I learned the alphabet, but I'll go first. I'll go now. So I'm Margaret Hedstrom, and I am privileged to own one of the houses along the Untitled Chapter Road, which I inherited from my parents, Herb and Jane Hedstrom. And I am a professor at the University of Michigan, but I'm about to retire and move up there as my permanent base. I think I said in my letter that there really are three issues that intersect for me around this parcel. One is I'm very concerned about the environment. The parcel has not been cared for or stewarded well. And I would like to see, restoration, removal of invasive species, all those kinds of things. And a management plan that reduces the amount of trash and probably traffic on the beach. One of my roles at the University of Michigan was as interim director of the Museum Studies program. And I teach archives. I have a PhD in history. And so I think I bring some expertise around a lot of these issues, especially the historic preservation piece of it. And I'm passionate I guess that's too trite of a term, but I'm passionate about recognition of that these are ancestral homelands, and I do think that needs to be recognized. And then I have, the interests of someone with property that is not immediately adjacent, but nearby, with regard to traffic and noise and all those kinds of things. So I hope we can sort out and come up with a good solution that everybody can live with.
Thank you so much. And we're just going to introduce committee members first. So that's why the alphabetical order for that group. All right, Dave, if you could introduce yourself, please.
Can you hear me okay? I'm Dave Homiak. I live next door to Passion Pit with my wife Patty and 2 dogs. We've lived next door for going on 25 years. This is our 25th year. And for those 25 years, I've been the caretaker of lots 26 and 27 that the Minnesota Department of Transportation pretty much abdicated responsibility for. So the kinds of things Margaret's talking about a really larger scale than we were certainly willing to take on as neighbors. I can't rip wrap the shoreline. That would cost $50,000. But I have removed the downed trees. I've removed all of the downfall. I've cleared all of the brush so that the fire hazard is reduced. We've hauled the trash out of there for 2.5 decades, patched the holes in the road, plowed the snow all the way out to the county road there. And we retired and moved here full-time 4 years ago. During that time, we've watched the traffic volume at the lots, the DOT lots, increase substantially as a result of the general increase in tourism. And I think at the start of your introduction, you said that all of the lodging is up again another 25% this year. And so I don't see anything that will decrease the amount of traffic volume at this property. The thing I want to stress as everybody evaluates this is, think about what you're doing as if you were planning for a tourist beach park next to your house. I've been next to this property for 25 years and certainly don't plan to leave. But it needs to be a livable solution for all. As Margaret said, Margaret's in lot 24. She's on the other side of me. But as people visit this property, particularly from out of town or people that are familiar with the rules around inland lakes, there's a tremendous lack of respect for private property boundaries. And those boundaries do exist. And so as this committee moves forward, my primary concerns are really around how do we delineate this as a property that people can visit and still make them aware that there are limits to that property. So thank you for selecting me. And I have quite a lot of historical information about the property itself, including the abstract for the property that dates back to 1880 to the original owner, Antoine and Antoinette Phillison, along with all of the property exchanges that have occurred. It's 110 pages long, and if I could digitize it and share it with you, I certainly would do that if anyone has interest. Again, thanks for allowing me to participate, and please remember there are people that live here too today. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dave. John Moran.
Yeah, bonjour, Guinoa. Hello to all of you. Well, my mother was born in Chippewa City and lived there till she was about 13. So she told me a lot of stories about growing up there. And so I've always been interested in that history. And so this gives you an opportunity. I read Stacy's book, which was very, very good book to read. It gave me a lot of good background information that kind of reinforced some of the stories my mother told me. But I always want to learn more. I'm a historian too. And so that's why I wanted to be on the committee.
Thank you, John. David. David, could you introduce yourself, please?
Hello, I'm David Roll. I represent the Parks and Trails Commission. I I serve on that board out of the interest of serving my community, and I suppose in an interest of helping develop green spaces and public access ways that seem deserving. And that seems to kind of be the mission, and the interpretation of what they're up to is enhance tourists and visitors' experiences in the county any way we can. So I'm here to be, I guess, the eyes and ears of the board and report to them, and to be of hand of any idea or solution making I can for what is apparently a very contentious issue. But I'm here to be all eyes and ears and to be fair. And so I live up here in Maple Hill. That's the district I represent there on the board or that commission. And I guess I'm just going to sit back and listen to everybody and try to come with the fairest ideas I can as I sit back and allow this process to unfold, to hear everybody out, all the different stakeholders and all the different folks involved. So thank you for allowing me to be on the board. And I guess educationally, my background is international relations and history. And I too have, I guess, a common thread there, as I have worked at Historic Fort Snelling in the past as a reenactor. So I certainly can understand everybody's perspectives quite a bit. And I hope that I can serve as, certainly of help as we move forward with all this. So thank you so much for allowing me to serve on the board, and I'll go ahead and yield my time to the chair. Thank you.
We appreciate that, David. Tyson.
Thanks, Ann. I'm Tyson Smith, local boy made good by taking over his daddy's law practice. Some of you know me from that perspective. I'm here to provide, I suppose, a voice for some of the people like me who grew up in this town and are very concerned about maintaining the elements of the public trust that have been in the trust, but also doing so in a way that's fair and respectful to private property owners. My job on a day-to-day basis is advocating for people that want to protect their property and their rights. But on the other hand, I also work very hard to make sure that those parts of our county that are really precious jewels, like this area is, I think, can stay that way and can still be enjoyed by everyone.
Thank you, Tyson. And Kelly.
Good afternoon, everybody. Kelly Swearingen. I am a city councilor serving. For those who don't know me and my background, I am a 1985 graduate of Cook County High School, proudly. Born and raised here. I see Margaret, your dad and my grandmother were actually classmates. So it'd be fun to talk to you someday. Just have a real interest as to what will happen with this area. As a kid, I spent a lot of time out there. We would go hang out on the beach, pick rocks, still love to go there and pick rocks. I have seen a change in how the property is treated over the last many years by the increase in the numbers of people that we have here, quite different than in my younger days. So hoping that, yes, I'm on city council, but as somebody who lives here, that I can help to work towards a solution that will best fit the needs of all, and that we have the opportunity to work together and hear different opinions, different thoughts, different educational material, and we can come together with a good outcome.
Thank you so much. Well, Tim has not yet joined us, so let's give an opportunity for our guests who are attending this evening to introduce themselves. Pat.
Hi, everyone. I'm Pat Eliason. I'm the Cook County Sheriff. I'm not part of this committee, and Tim Nelson asked me to log in tonight to, I'm guessing, to answer any questions about past problems that have arisen from the Passion Pit area, and maybe to give some insight of what future problems may occur down there. Last year was obviously the busiest year we've had in response to the Passion Pit area. We had several calls down there ranging from just disturbances to trespassings to assaults. So there was a lot of visitors in our area last year, as everybody knows, and this summer we are forecasting even more visitors into this area. Most people are considerate, but we are seeing many inconsiderate visitors come to this area. So if I can answer any questions tonight, I certainly will. Otherwise, I will just sit back and listen.
And we have Tribal Chair Bobby Deschamps. Would you like to share with us this evening?
Yeah, I'm Bobby Deschamps. I'm the Grand Portage Tribal Chair. When I was on the county board, this piece of property got brought up at the county board a few times, and I think, well, as you read the paper or whatever there, Grand Portage has put in a petition to get the property put in the Grand Portage Trust. One of my biggest things is to make sure this property stays accessible for tribal members, for anybody that wants to go down there and visit the beach. The lake is a gift to us. It's getting to be fewer and fewer places along the North Shore where you can actually go down and enjoy the lake, Lake Superior. And I guess, well, I have a lot of stuff to say, but not tonight. So I'm just going to listen. That's why I'm here anyway. So.
Thank you. And Administrator Yorkie.
Good evening, everyone. I'm James Yorkie, and I'm the County Administrator. I've been in this role for a little over 6 months now. And this topic of the Passion Pit has been on my radar even before I applied for the job. So I'm really here just to listen and learn and benefit from your experiences and the knowledge you have to share. So thanks for letting me be here.
Is there anyone I've missed? All right. Well, the next thing on our agenda is to really talk about our purpose and timeline. And our purpose is really to assist the county board in determining whether the county should acquire this MnDOT parcel, which is east of Grand Marais, locally known as Passion Pit. Since the request for committee members was released, Grand Portage has petitioned, as we all know, the state to return the land to the band. And the RTC, the Reservation Tribal Council, turned in that petition a few weeks ago, asking for the land to be put in trust for the people of Grand Portage. And I really appreciate, Chairman Deschamps, the remark that you made that it would be, this land, if you received it, would be for the people of Grand Portage and for anyone else who wants to use it. It is a gift, and Lake Superior is a gift. And kind of given our charge, our committee has up to a year, up to 12 months from today, our first meeting, to make some recommendations to the board, and our work can end earlier too, depending on the disposition of the property by MnDOT, and also based on what this committee determines is going to be a recommendation. So we have 12 months, it may be shorter than that, and we're going to make a recommendation. But I think before we get engaged in that, we really need to think about the history. And I'm sure you've all read the packet that Tim Nelson sent out, which is a very nice composition of information. But, you know, just thinking back in the late 1800s, there were about 100 indigenous families living in the settlement of Chippewa City. That church was completed before 1900, I believe it was 1895, and the money that they collected to build that church was from basket socials that the Anishinaabe people held. They made baskets from birch bark, filled them with food, sold them to lumberjacks and other people in the community. And then sadly, after the turn of the century, 1907, there was a huge fire, and this forest fire swept through the area, destroyed most of the homes. But the church was saved, and Chippewa City Church is the last physical structure remaining of that historic Chippewa City. And it's on the National Historic Register. And that place below the church, as you get down to the lake, is so important. There's 2 cemeteries that were at Chippewa City, one below the old road, very close to the lake. Maria, I think that's where you talked about perhaps your husband may have family buried. And that there's a new location north of the church on the other side. And then, of course, we know the world famous artist, George Morrison. His family resided in the area, which is significant as well. So that's a little bit of history, but I would like right now others who are much more knowledgeable and have a much deeper understanding to add to that story. Because I think through sharing our stories, we can learn a lot tonight and have a good foundation to begin our work. So is there anyone else that would like to share a story or some history about Grand Portage? So if there are no stories this evening, I would just encourage for us to share those as the time comes up and is appropriate, because there are a lot of perspectives that we need to share in order to make a good, fair decision about this property. Next on our agenda is our meeting schedule and the topic of public engagement. And we really have some things we need to do immediately. And I think that we may need to meet more frequently early on to be able to develop a management plan for the property, so that for Dave, for Margaret, for other property owners on that stretch, that we are able to manage effectively and make sure they have a good environment in which to live. We need to, after that, after we look at the short-term management and after we know it's effective, because I think we're going to have to implement something and then come back and talk about, did it work? If not, do something different. But then after that piece is taken care of, then we need to determine, what are things like historical preservation or a connection to Chippewa City. Do we want to put benches? Do we want to visit with Grand Portage about what they would like for the site? And do we want to make a recommendation of disposition of the property? So there's something we'll do on the short term, something in the long term. And then we need to think about public engagement. So do we want to have a public comment period at the beginning of our meeting? Do we want the public to submit emails or letters to Tim Nelson for collection and then to share out with the group so we can review them? Or do we have maybe some other ideas? What would people like to see in terms of public engagement?
I have a question before we get to that. When you say a management plan, are you talking about an interim management plan for like starting now?
Absolutely. Thank you for helping me to clarify that. And maybe that's something we can talk about right now. Would we like to, first of all, develop a short-term schedule where we meet maybe every couple of weeks to get this short-term plan put together, to implement it, and then to get feedback from people who are actually living in the area, and then move on with our larger pieces related to the long-term aspects of the property. Mr. Nelson.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair. And I think that's really an important element to look at, because these are basically two kind of parallel approaches that we're going to be looking at here. And I think of utmost importance, especially to the people who live on Old Shore Road, and especially those that are adjacent to the property. That's where the concerns have arisen. And that's where at least that had come to the Board of Commissioners at that time, the noise, traffic, all that kind of stuff is what is what kind of in the use of that property and access onto the beach and everything like that is what generated that petition to the board to do a few things. There's that list that had been submitted last year. And so I think we do need to address that in and of itself on a short-term thing. And we would be working then with, you know, to make a recommendation to the county board that we would make a work with the MnDOT district engineer to be able to get that into place. And that would at least suffice or hope to, and as you said, be able to monitor that over the summer and make sure that we're hitting on any of those issues so that it does not grow into the kind of public nuisance or whatever in terms of the overuse of the parcel would become. So I think we do need to focus on that. The other things that we can do, or in terms of looking at long-term, yeah, we can talk about later down the road, but I do like your idea of maybe meeting a little bit more frequently to get something in place that would give us that kind of cushion time to be able to discuss as we go further in. And yes, that is why I did invite the Sheriff Eliason to attend, is to look at, you know, the kind of logistics behind, you know, what has happened, what his perspectives in terms of what we can enforce and things like that. So that's why I did invite him as well for his input.
Tim, this is Dave Homyak.
Margaret just first.
Tim?
I'm not the chair. The Commissioner Sullivan is the chair.
Ann?
Go ahead.
So before you talk about how to manage it as a park in the interim, is everybody on the committee aware of how the conveyance process works and what the county has done in the form of, as has the Grand Portage Band? Both have expressed an interest in purchasing the property. And so we can talk about a short-term management plan and submit that to the DOT, but that's in lieu of being prepared to purchase the property. And in all of the meetings that have taken place to date, in the prior document that was submitted for review by this committee, there's never been a discussion about the money. And I think, Tim, you're probably closest to it and can talk about the conveyance process because you and I have both been in conversations with Dwayne Hill about it. But before you, as soon as you develop a management plan and you submit it and you start to put up signs and even a porta potty, you've sanctioned it as a park. And if you build it, they will come. And it's not just tribal members and locals, it's the world at large will now think it's a legal, bona fide park. But there has never in any of these meetings and in the prior documents been a discussion about how you acquire it. Thank you.
I just had a jurisdictional question. When we're talking about a management plan, are we talking about a management plan for the small piece, I think it's 38 feet, that the county owns? Or are we talking about the county plus the DOT land? I'm confused about that because there are obviously pretty complex jurisdictional issues.
Mr. Nelson?
Thank you, Madam Chair. And that's good questions. I mean, both on behalf of Dave and Margaret in terms of the discussion that we'll be having. The management plan sounds a little bit more formalized than it needs to be. And it would be for both basically the county 38-foot stretch and the MnDOT property. With regards to conveyance, and Mr. Homyak is correct that we've been in discussions off and on with Dwayne Hill of MnDOT. who is looking at this process. He had been contacted. I mean, to go way back at the beginning of all of this, there's always been some discussions back and forth. There's always been some concerns, but it really kind of rose to a head when MnDOT was approached, and I believe Mr. Homack, maybe you had approached them first or so with interest or whatever in the disposition of the property, or maybe Rena did as our temporary administrator. But in any case, there are three outcomes that could happen as a result of this whole discussion, and that is it could end up in the county hands, it could end up in the tribe's hands, or it could end up in private hands. MnDOT is going to get rid of this property. And they are in the process right now. And this is one of the reasons why we haven't talked so much about the numbers, because that's what people want to do. Well, what's going to be the numbers? We don't know what those numbers are. We can have kind of guesstimates, but they're in the process of going through the appraisal internally within MnDOT for that. And they don't expect that very soon. But yes, as far as the county would be to go, and I think maybe the tribe has more leverage issues or leverage things that they can employ that the county can't necessarily do. But yes, it would be an acquisition as far as a money kind of thing. And when we're looking at the short-term management plan, basically we're looking to mitigate the impacts on the neighboring properties, not to build up and to make it go. Those impacts are there. They're happening. They were there last year. So that's what the petition came to the board last summer was. The request was for porta potties, was for garbage, was for this and that. And so this kind of management plan is looking to balance providing a minimal amount of management and services for that lot, but not propagating it as a park, not doing anything. All it would be doing would be mitigating those concerns of the impact on the neighboring properties, which would allow this committee to then discuss it fully in terms of what kind of recommendations we would have. And that's where the discussions about, okay, where do we see the vision going? This is kind of a longer term visioning thing. Does this end up with the Grand Portage tribe? And if so, do they want to hear our concerns and our issues and things like that? So that's where that discussion would take place. And we don't know really the mechanism of conveyance if they were to work something out with the tribe, but we do know with the county, we would have to acquire it, and that would be part of that discussion. But all we wanted to do with the short-term mitigation plan, like I said, is just mitigate those adverse impacts that are going to happen regardless if we have this committee or not.
Correct. And David, I see your hand has been up for a while. David Roll.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Tim, I was just curious. Is there a way to create an interim solution of a short-term joint powers agreement of somehow cost sharing, getting these services done in the interim as things fall into place, kind of like we did with the Joint Bluffs agreement?
If I could just answer that real quick, that would be part of the discussion with the short-term management that we're looking at it. It would be in whether we perform minimal services, whether the city helps us out, whether we contract with them. I don't think it would go to a point of having a joint powers agreement, because we're still struggling with the joint powers issue with the Sawtooth Bluffs. It's a bigger deal than just contracting out services or seeing what needs to be done. First, we want to know what can we do minimally to mitigate that impact on neighboring properties, and then who may be the ones doing that.
Yeah, and maybe somebody else can answer my second question, which is how soon does the tribe get an answer on their petition to the state for being awarded the land? Does anybody have any idea? I'm just curious.
I spoke to Dwayne Hill last week, and what he said to me was, we're in the very beginning of the process and nothing is going to happen for 1 to 2 years. And think that's about right. My parents acquired a landlocked parcel that from MnDOT, I think in about 1988 or 9 or something like that. And I can just tell you, it took forever. And the legal bills were higher than the actual price of the land. So I don't think, I mean, an interim plan needs to be effective over, I would say, at least 2 years. They're very, very slow in these processes, unless somebody's got a way of expediting it. So that's my understanding.
Well, that's what I'm worried about. And I guess that's kind of where I'm going with this, is it seems like it's pertinent that we have to get a plan for 2 years out, probably. Just
Mr.
as a suggestion.
Bersheim.
Thank you. I was out there this morning and took a look at it. And I think part of this discussion is, yes, we're going to have this conveyance, which I look at as a separate issue because there's variables there. But we do own the land as a county right now. We seem to have some kind of access or egress to this property. And I think we have some real legitimate ownership concerns there about people and the mitigations that need to be taken care of. I do think that whatever happens first, we do need to take a look at the road. We need to look at parking as an interim issue, and at least investigate more about what we can and can't do. Because no matter what happens with that conveyance of the land, we still have property there. Mm-hmm. We still have the neighbors there. And so, yes, mitigations too, but I think let's look at what we have so far and what looks like we're going to continue to have, and see what we can do as far as making some recommendations with that short term and long term. So in other words, if we know a conveyance is going to take place, if we do any changes with what we have, we got to make sure that they're amenable or suitable or can adapt to changes made in the future. So I think we could take a look at that because it's a big issue. There's issues there with that current property, but we own it. And I think we have to pay attention to it and see how we're going to manage it for 1 to 2 years.
Dave, you had your hand up.
Myron, the county has a 37-foot road right away there. That's the piece that you're referring to that you own today. There are 2 lots. Lot number 26, it's 100 feet wide. Lot number 27 is 121.7 feet wide. Those are owned by the Minnesota Department of Transportation, and they're in the conveyance process. If they were to sell them today, the price would be at least the taxable value, and Tim can attest to this. They just sold a lot directly to the west. It sold for exactly the taxable value. They did not send an appraiser out. So if they were to convey that property today in absence of an assessor going out and reviewing the value of the property, it would sell for, I believe, $283,000, which is the current taxable value of those 2 lots. That's available on the county GIS site. Mm-hmm. So it isn't a true statement that we don't know what it would cost. We know at least what it would cost. Now, perhaps the assessor might say, well, because it's a drain field and has a river cutting through it diagonally, and because it requires an additional $60,000 in riprap, and because it requires drainage and tar mitigation to clean the property up and make it a buildable site, that it has a lower value than that. Or they might not. And I want to cite 2 examples just to frame in what it likely will cost for you. The property directly to the west of the parking lot was sold to John Quafey for $190,000. That parcel is 100 feet wide. If you do the math, that's $1,900 per linear foot. The property directly to the west of that was just conveyed by Minnesota Department of Transportation. The city declined to bid on it, although they did hold up the bidding process for 60 days to give them an opportunity to do so, which they declined. That property sold, I believe, for over $300,000, which equates somewhere in the neighborhood of $1,500 to $1,600 per linear foot. What that says is that regardless of ancestors, regardless of anything to the contrary, simply the value of Lake Superior Lakeshore says that that property is likely valued between its tax value of $283,000 and as much as $380,000. So when you're talking about a 1 acre park, for whatever purpose it is, it's more than just we'd all like to preserve history. We're asking the county to step up and make an investment in this park that's probably on the order of $500,000 by the time you factor in what it will take to mitigate things like shoreline erosion. So it's important as you proceed down this path, if you're going to request from the Minnesota Department of Transportation that they grant you an interim operating permit, which is the only way that you can really operate a park on it. You can't just continue to usurp the state's property and operate a park on it, as has been done for 80 years. But they will grant you an operating permit on it, provided that it's a good faith step toward purchase with full knowledge of the costs. Thank you.
Mr. Nelson?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I was just looking at the agenda, and I saw Bobby's had his hand up as well. But looking at the agenda, we kind of leapt forward to get into the discussion of the short-term management stuff, and we kind of bypassed out the schedule and public engagement portions of it and jumped right in. Now, we could still stay on that and then come back around to the public engagement meeting schedule if you want. But I just wanted to kind of point that out.
Absolutely. And I was thinking the same thing, that really what we want to do is talk about how we can immediately try to care for the property and address the issues that came up last summer, because they are going to come up again in the next month. And we want to make sure that we're doing everything we can for those individuals that are living in that area. Margaret, you had your hand up. Did you want to say something? Okay. Stacy.
I would like to defer my time to Chairman Dishaw.
All right.
Yeah, I think we're missing the opportunity here. We hear people talking about putting dollar amounts on stolen land. We need to get this group together and educate them on how this whole area has came about. John Moran is an excellent history person on this. I can see Mr. Homiak shaking his head. That's very rude.
Bobby, I'm sorry. I have to live next to it. And when you call it stolen land, you're inciting passions that result in threats to us even. Bobby,
no.
I have the title for the property for all of Lot 3, Bobby. And to call it stolen land is not appropriate either.
Well, I think if you had the proper education on it, which we have a person on this call that is more than willing to do it, I'm sure. The history of the North Shore, the history of the Anishinaabe people.
Bobby, I read all of the books in Stacy's bibliography because I'm dearly interested in the area, and I don't want you to think I'm ignorant about the difficulties that the Grand Portage Band has faced over the years. I clearly understand them. What I'm objecting to in terms...
I didn't get on here. I didn't get on here to argue. I got on here to state our opinion. This is the perfect opportunity to educate this committee. And that's where I thought we were going.
Calling it stolen land is problematic for a lot of reasons.
So let's try to get back on track. We have two areas that we need to talk about, short-term and long-term. The first thing I want to do is make sure that we are addressing what is about to happen in the next month, that there's going to be an increase in the number of individuals on that property. I want to care for it for those of you that are living there. That's one of our charges as a group. So there are things we need to explore, such as, do we want signage? Do we want some hours to make it reasonable? Like, I'm thinking quiet time down at the rec park is from 10 p.m. to 8 a.m. Do we want trash receptacles so that people have a place to put their trash? Keeping it very minimal, not creating a park, but just trying to keep the area clean and tidy and manageable for those of you that are residents. Pat, are you available to speak right now?
Yep.
All right,
Just got
so
on my supper.
a question that I have is, if we were to set up some times, quiet times, 10 p.m. to 8 a.m., how would that impact your deputies, and do you have the ability to provide some enforcement for that?
That's a very good question. We would have to provide the enforcement. A timely response may be difficult this summer. We are down 2 positions and we have no applicants. So, but like, I guess what I wanted to talk about, when you say you're setting times, the county already has a curfew.
Right.
And it's just for people under 18, but, and that curfew extends till midnight. So this would have to be something in addition to that curfew, I would imagine.
Okay. So time, a quiet time for residents, whatever those hours may be, would be important. It could either be curfew if we're looking at thinking it's primarily younger residents or younger visitors. Mr. Nelson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And Pat, I was kind of following up on this. So are you stating that if we were to do, a short-term kind of plan, management plan, so to speak, and we would not be able to, it would take more authority to post hours, or is it possible to just post a sign anyway without, changing any laws for it, like recommended quiet time, or just, you know what I'm saying?
That would be a good question for Molly. What I can see happening is if you set the quiet time for 10 p.m. and somebody calls in a loud party down there, and they argue that the county ordinance is midnight, we really don't have any ground to stand on.
Okay. All right. So maybe following with that county ordinance. What about trash? Kelly, you're here. Has there been discussion by the city of cooperating with the county on any kind of trash pickup? If we were to have a trash receptacle available, or would that be strictly something we'd want to look at as a county?
Thank you. We never got into specifics. Obviously, Stacy, myself, Tim, and Heidi Dukirk did a very small committee talking about some things. Those recommendations obviously came back to the county board. I believe Tim included that 4-page document in this packet. So I never went back and actually asked the city, are we willing to? Because that was not an ask at the time. If that's where we want to go, I'm more than happy to go back and ask about that. I definitely think I use it a lot, way less than I used to. If I'm there once a year, but I have noticed most times when I've been there, garbage cans are overflowing. There used to be a very small barrel. I don't even know who put it there, how it got there. I think at the very least something should be there. When we met as a small group, Tim, Heidi, and Stacy, myself, I even mentioned, is that something that maybe, I know highway department people start at 6 in the morning in the summer hours, May to roughly October. Is that something someone could do right at 6 a.m.? But I'm willing to embark in conversations if that's the direction that we decide to go, and willing to go back and talk to the council and staff as to what we would have available.
Okay, thank you. Margaret.
I'm wondering whether we have the authority to ban certain types of items, and in particular, plastics and styrofoam. I mean, the part of the problem is not just with trash receptacles, but you know, it gets windy, somebody drops their styrofoam cup and the next day it's on the beach in front of my place. And you know, we're putting so many microplastics into the lake, it's really terrible. And so as an, you know, I'm not suggesting don't have a trash can, but I don't know what authority we would have to limit the amount of trash that gets hauled in there.
Mr. Nelson?
Thank you, Madam Chair. The difficulty, I think, goes along the same lines as what Sheriff Eliason was talking about with regards to quiet time. In order for us to do anything beyond what already exists, we would actually have to adopt that into ordinance effect in order for it to be enforceable for us. So if we were to ban anything from going on onto that property, it would have to be by virtue of adopting a new ordinance. We don't even have an ordinance to that extent at this point in time. So we'd have to create an ordinance, and it would take all the public hearings and everything like that to go through. So you know, it's not a bad idea. It's just logistically it would be a little bit more difficult to be able to accomplish, especially in the short time that we have available.
So now,
I just want to say, just sorry, just as a response to that, I totally agree with Chairman Deschamps that the lake is a gift, and you know, we ought to also be thinking about how can we establish norms that make it such that people who do leave trash behind are, I don't want to say ostracized, but they get the message that you don't do these kinds of things in special places like this. I worry a little bit too much about saying, well, we'll make another ordinance. And I think that that's an educational piece, and working very hard to establish norms of respect.
Margaret, I really appreciate you bringing up respect, because part of what I think this group needs to do is to help educate and to make sure that people understand that we need to respect this place and we need to respect its history. And so I thank you for that. Stacy, I saw you had your hand up.
Yes, thank you. I just wanted to add to what Kelly said, because she and Heidi and Tim and I were on the micro committee who first started talking about this. I think everyone's intention, and we were all in agreement about this, is that rather than calling more attention to the beach area, having even some kind of public guidance, whether that's, you know, a Sam Zimmerman trash can, which seems to make the news like a lot, the abundance of pretty trash cans we have in our community. So, you know, if there were something as simple as a historical statement, or even some loose guidelines to indicate that it's a public place of importance to a lot of people. As Sheriff Eliason said, most people do follow the rules. They are respectful. I was just traveling in the Southwest, and on the scenic byway that goes between Santa Fe and Taos. And we saw entire cases of beer bottles thrown from cars on the scenic byway. I've visited the Passion Pit Beach the Chippewa City Beach a lot over the course of my life. And I have never, ever seen it look even close to what I witnessed in the Southwest. And so I think we're making too big of a deal out of some bad apples. And I think we can have a shared space, whether it becomes part of the tribal trust lands or if the county decides to acquire it. I think we can have both, and just very limited guidance or direction is going to go a long way here. So I just want to reiterate that.
Thank you. Kelly.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I want to reiterate what Stacy said, and the key word in all of this for right now, I think really truly is simple. And not that I mean to minimize it, but sometimes simple understandings and simple reminders for people is best. One of the things that I also think of is how maybe a communication to school students and high school students, that is an area that was heavily used by students. When you're 16, does it matter to you as much? Are you thinking about picking up your pop cans when you're having a fire or doing? Probably not. So maybe a little bit of us being active and proactive, I should say, in who we reach out to. You know, whether it's something in the paper once a month, whether it's on our Visit Cook County communications that they have, whether it's letters to our students, but trying to stay simple and just remind people of the area that they're in and that they are able, it's a privilege to be able to use it at this time. And so if we have that privilege, we should be careful with it.
Thank you. So it seems like we have some direction about collecting trash and about providing some words, some information for people about the history of the place. That's a start. Would it be appropriate, before we go forward with any kind of decision making, to collect some information from those individuals that live on Old Shore Road about what they would like? We're all talking minimal, I'm hearing that, and I'm respectful of that. But I also would like to make sure that we're addressing the needs of the people that are there. Could we draft a letter and send it to all of those homeowners asking them, do they want signage? Would they want quiet time hours? Do they want a trash receptacle? Do they want a porta potty? Do they want bags for dog waste? Find out what people want and don't want, and then come back with that information and make some decisions short term for that management of that place. And then once we have those decisions made, then we can move forward to talk about the history and to talk about this larger piece over time with public and private ownership and the level of use and the kind of services envisioned long-term, whether it be by the county or private or by the band. Does it seem reasonable to deal with the short term first and then come back to deal with those larger issues? I'm seeing a couple of nods. Margaret, you have your hand up?
I do have my hand up. I also, the longer issues are also environmental impact issues. And I do think that we need to do some analysis, possibly get someone to do both a cultural resources impact study and a environmental impact study around the capacity, the parking, I mean, all those kinds of things, the erosion, the stream that runs through there intermittently, things like that, that yeah, and the invasive species and all kinds of other stuff. So I don't, I think we want to certainly move on the historical piece, but the environmental impacts are also important to me.
Okay.
And I think to others.
Mhm. Kelly.
Thank you. Couple of quick things is, as you talk, I want to answer Margaret's question too a little bit. In surveying surrounding property owners, I don't want to not recognize them. I think we also have to be careful about how we go about that, because that sets a precedent for anything anywhere else that happens. I mean, I live within the city limits. I don't know that I like my streets so busy. I have to hear all the downtown bar music, but those things, you're kind of inviting problems almost, I think. I mean, we have two property owners here with us who I think could probably address those concerns in the short term. The other thing that Margaret, you talked about with erosion control, as a city councilor, I'm trying to attend North Shore Management Board meetings, which is a very important thing. I know there's a county commissioner who is also on that. I haven't been able to get to hardly any of the meetings because they happen to have them the nights that we have city council meeting. Margaret Watkins from Grand Portage is on that and representing it. They are looking very in-depth at what we can do and what they're going to set the North Shore erosion control. So I think that's a good place to follow or check in with. But just two of those things that I wanted to put out there and make people aware of, because I don't think that's something that this group will probably get too in depth, but there are groups and people who are working on that. So
Thank you for that. And we could certainly gather that information from Commissioner Storley, who sits on that group. Mr. Nelson, you've had your hand up.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. And just as a follow-up just of this last statement, I also attend those North Shore Management Board meetings, and it's the coastal erosion hazard mapping project that's been ongoing for quite some time. Yeah, there's a lot of good work that's being done there. Right now, we're in the discussions in terms of how specific or detailed that we can get based on the amount of funds that is available and everything like that. So that is an ongoing project for that place. The other thing in terms of an environmental review, I can't help it in my role of regulator kind of leap over into the mind frame of it's great to review or to take a look at those impacts. It's just really important how we frame that. Anything that we're talking about doing here doesn't rise to the level of any official environmental review. So no environmental assessment worksheet or environmental impact statement or anything like that. This doesn't even come close to reaching any of those particular thresholds. Now we could, if we wanted to, do a discretionary one, but they end up costing, I mean, Mr. Homiak was talking about the cost of the property, but just doing an environmental review on something like that could get up to $100,000 depending on how much is added into that. So if we did want to look or do any kind of environmental review on that, it would be just really important not to call it an environmental assessment worksheet or anything like that, but just contact any kind of consultant and really narrow the scope to exactly what it looks like. It's a fairly small piece of property. The concerns are big, but the property is small. So if it was narrowly defined, then that could be something that could be accomplished without having to go through the official route.
Dave, I saw you had your hand up, and I also had a question for you. I know you had many concerns last summer about the number of people, the trash, the noise. I mean, it went on and on. Being next to that property, what would be helpful to you in terms of immediate management prior to our summer season?
I want to step back and answer your earlier question. You asked about whether you should survey the neighbors, and the answer is yes. There were 5 neighbors who were not selected for this committee.
Mm-hmm.
at all ends of the road. Leslie Carter wasn't selected. Dave, the lawyer down the road, wasn't selected. Bob Hanson wasn't selected. And they all would like a voice, and I'm not their voice. And so before you take any action that sanctify this as a park, even something as simple as a trash can, and I'm not against trash cans, and I'm not against porta potties, and I'm not against hours and signs. But you heard very clearly from Sheriff Eliason, who I've had a lot of conversations with about this property. There are jurisdictional challenges, and you'd have to change ordinances to even do simple things like say you can't have alcohol down there. Right now, that property is managed by the DNR, not even the DOT, as soon as you step onto the beach. And there are no rules against alcohol, for example. So I would welcome you sending a letter to the neighborhood and asking them for more direct input on very tangible named items.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. And if we were to do that, we would want to do it sooner rather than later because of the fast approaching tourist season. So I'm wondering, would there be a subcommittee, a small group that would be willing to draft a letter to mail to the 14 property owners that are on Old Shore Road? If we could get that often in the mail and ask for a timely response? Or would this group prefer to have a small group draft that and then bring it back to this committee? What are your thoughts? Mr. Nelson?
Thank you, Madam Chair. One of the things that we could do, and in the fact that, you know, I've been kind of part of these discussions, hearing all of the different sides and different ends of this, I certainly would be willing to sit down and draft up a letter and send it out to the entire group, or if you wanted to have a smaller committee work on it. But I could do that based off of what I've heard from everybody in terms of concerns, and framing it to address Kelly's concern there, not as, you know, the veto power or anything like that, but just asking for a certain amount of feedback or any input you might have. And certainly, as I was trying to state in the beginning, not being selected for the committee doesn't mean that we don't want their participation. We want the public participation in there. There were 21 people, and the vast majority of them weren't selected for the committee. So it's just, it is important that we have, and that's why it was on the agenda there, that we kind of discuss a little bit about the public engagement process, how we do want to engage that. Certainly, the concern was both hearing from the immediate area, because the Parks and Trails Commission actually recommended that we have 2, but no more than 3 people who were in the immediate area, and then others from the community at large. And so the commissioners kind of discussed and selected that based off of that. So.
Okay. So how does the group feel about, oh, Mr. Homiak?
I'd like to help you draft that, Tim.
And are you suggesting that, what, I don't know how that would necessarily work. Do you want to draft it and send it to me, or do you want me to draft it and send it to you, or?
No, Ann asked originally if a small group was willing to draft a letter to the neighbors, and the question really wasn't answered, and I'm volunteering to be part of that small group.
Thank you. Stacy?
I believe the whole committee then should be a part of letter review.
All right. So let's do this. Are there any other individuals that would like to sit on a subcommittee, draft a letter, and then bring it back to this group? David, your hand is up.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chairman. I disagree. I think Tim has a handle on things. I think he should write the letter. And I believe if he leaves 2 open-ended questions for anybody to write back on, which is there anything we missed? And is there any other way you feel, or, you know, regarding what you really want? And that way we can hear from everybody. And it's not, no personal interest of any one person. And if everybody wants this letter brought back to this committee to approve before we send it out, I think that makes sense. But I think putting all our emotions into this and working as a team is going to be crazy. I don't want to do it. I yield the rest of my time to chair.
Certainly. Margaret.
I tend to agree with that as someone who's done a fair amount of this kind of research. We're only talking about 14 people. I think a bigger question is it anonymous, or do you want to know exactly who is expressing what opinion? And what do you do? What do you do to get the maximum response? Because if you get 5, it's not that meaningful, So we want to try to get everybody, make it simple, allow some open-ended questions, and try to get 100% response.
Thank you, Margaret. Kelly, you have your hand up.
Thank you. I'm wondering if you draft a letter to 14 people in specific in one area and ask for opinions or thoughts, how then, going back to what we started at the beginning of the meeting, how then are we going to have public engagement? Because I don't think it should only be 14 people who get to express their opinion. We can't just package it into that. You need to be able to open it then to the public. And how would we do that?
And certainly we can do that through some public comments that we provide here, that we have here at our meetings, or that we solicit through WTIP, engaging the Cook County News Herald. I think we need to reach out and ask for input. But I do think for the property owners, which is why initially this was brought to the county board, we need to provide an opportunity to get specific information from them, bring that back as input to this committee, and then that will be part of our decision-making process. But we need to do it soon, again, because time is of the essence with the tourist season. So what I'm hearing is, if Mr. Nelson drafts the letter, that we would bring it back to this group for approval, and then we could send that out. And then we also need to think about how to engage other members of the public with this. Mr. Nelson, you had your hand up.
Yes, I did. Thank you, Madam Chair. And really, I did want to, you just elaborated on that, that this letter and engaging the 14 property owners per se on that road is just in dealing with gathering input in terms of what they would like to see with regards to the level of any kind of maintenance or things provided in the shorter term. But then we also have to have a discussion in terms of public engagement to get the most amount of engagement from the greater public as possible. So that's another different discussion.
Okay, thank you. So if we move forward with the letter, and then we want to talk about engaging the rest of the public in our short-term management of the space, what are some vehicles we can use or strategies we can use to get input from the rest of the public? Myron?
Good. Well, I just learned how to use reactions, and I was going to go to that, but I think that, we do have Zoom capabilities right now, and maybe we could, deal with I think I agree. We need to deal with the immediate issues, which is to respectfully, be responsible for this property next to private ownership. And I think that involves parking and a lot of other things. But I know with ordinances, that's going to take some time, but it's emphasizing what we can do. Then the next step would be to have just an open discussion from the public, like a forum. And what are your thoughts about this? And quite frankly, right now we're dealing with our property that we have control over. Mm-hmm. And so that's got to be our focus. I really think we can't get ahead of ourselves on these, conveyances. it's going to be part of the process, but right now our immediate concern is what we have and what we're responsible for. So I think if we got to have a public engagement on that, you know, of what's reasonable to expect from the public, you know, when they use it this summer. And so we don't get way ahead of ourselves in involving the public in some issues that we really haven't gotten to yet.
I agree. Thank you. Mr. Nelson?
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair. In looking at public engagement, I mean, that's what we kind of do with any of our zoning requests or anything like that. We hold public hearings. What we have done in the past is with other issues such as sled dogs a long time ago and other things, is we have actually held kind of listening sessions, and we can certainly promote on WTIP or other places the ability for the public to use the Zoom platform. They could send me an email at any time for that to be included in on public comment. But we can set aside, we can do what you had suggested earlier, is set aside a certain time frame in the beginning of each of the meetings, as the commissioners do, for a public comment period. But we can also have just a special or half of the meeting dedicated towards like a listening session where we would really promote that the public speak out, and we would give a list of the issues that we're wanting to hear about at that particular meeting. So we could do that once or twice or whatever during the course of this whole time, understanding these, of course, are public meetings, and we can certainly entertain any comments that members of the public who would wish to attend and provide as well.
I think that's an excellent suggestion. Other thoughts? So if we have a letter we're drafting, if we want to look at a public comment period, and also really reaching out to the public to put comments into written form and send them to Mr. Nelson, we can do all of those things and then collect that information back. When would we like to set our next meeting so that we could examine these? As we looked at the doodle poll, it was very difficult, Mr. Nelson is smiling, to find even a time for an initial meeting. But one thing I wanted to look at is what about Mondays? Thinking of, maybe a regularly scheduled second and fourth Mondays for the first few meetings would be helpful. Do people have their calendars, and could they look at them to see if that might be a possibility, a second and a fourth Monday? Margaret, you have your hand up. You're on mute.
I just had one more immediate issue that I wanted to add to the list.
Surely.
Which is in regard to that parking area. On the one hand, it is already encroaching into the parcel to the west. It's also become impervious with all the driving on it. And there's a very large pool of water that builds up there, and it's a huge mosquito breeding area, mosquito breeding area. Could anything be done about the surface there and not having a giant puddle that, breeds a lot of mosquitoes?
I know exactly what you're saying because I stepped in that puddle the other day when I was picking up trash. Mr. Nelson, you had your hand up.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And Margaret, that's a good question too. One of the things that we do have to do, I think, during this process is go ahead and delineate where those lines are. You talked about encroachment onto the west parcel and such. We need to definitively establish where the lines are. And I don't think that would be too tough based on all the survey work that's been done around town and such. So that shouldn't be too tough to do. With regards, once we delineate what the property is, whose is, we certainly would be able to do any kind of maintenance to our own property, that 30 some odd foot access strip that we have, to be able to correct that. We'd have to talk to the MnDOT in terms of what would they allow, or what steps would we need to do if any of that portion is on their property over to that side.
Myron.
Yes, I was out there this morning, and I don't know if anyone's noticed, but there's new survey tapes out there. And in looking at it, I'm not sure how it lined up, but it looked like maybe the road is okay the way it is. So I don't know. But the driveway, I mean, the parking area might be all right, but the driveway, I don't know. So yes, you're right. There's egress issues there, but there has been some survey that was just done.
And I'm hoping it was a survey, because I have seen some of the flagging down there that's been moved, and I believe it has been moved by kids and other individuals who have used that area. Mr. Homiak, you probably know.
So there are two parcels involved. The parcel immediately adjacent to the parking lot changed ownership in January, and Coldwell Banker didn't survey it. They just came out and put some tapes on it for purposes of illustration to help sell the property. So those are not official marks at all, Myron.
Okay.
The property immediately to the west of that, the former Minnesota DOT property, the owners of that parcel are from California. They visited the property about 30 days ago and came out, spent quite a bit of time walking around and identifying the corner posts and what steel markers they could find, and they put tape up. So none of that tape is official tape.
Okay. All right.
Okay. Mr. Nelson, you have your hand up.
I didn't.
It was my cursor on your box. I'm sorry. The wonders of technology. Oh my goodness. All right. So let's get back to some dates for us to meet again. I had talked about the 2nd or 4th Monday of May. How is that looking for people?
Good for me.
Good for everybody? Thumbs up?
I'm good with those. If we can set a time kind of too to, I'm sorry guys, I'm gonna have to jump off here pretty quick for a family thing, but yeah, if we can kind of limit our time or have a goal of time, that way if we have public comment, you know, I don't want us to be here for 3 hours.
Understandably. So does the 5 o'clock time work for everyone? Thumbs
Yes.
up if it works. All right, thank you, Maria. All right. And let's see. How are people feeling about a 2-hour meeting? Is that too long, or I'm seeing thumbs up. Kelly, you were the one that asked the question. Is 2 hours? She's like, eh.
I'd love a little bit less just because I'm walking in the door and it's dinner time and nobody's been home and dogs, and I've been at work for the day. So, but
Let's set it at 2 hours. But if we have a natural break prior to the 2 hours, and we know we're not going to get done with all agenda items, we can stop, we can take a pause and then continue. But for now, let's plan on our 2nd and 4th Mondays of the month till we get the ball rolling. All right. So, any other organizational or logistic questions? Mr. Nelson, your hand went up.
Yes, Madam Chair, thank you. I was thinking about that letter. Okay, so I'm assuming by consensus, then I'm going to be drafting the letter, and what I will do is try before the end of this week, get it out to everybody, and we're not going to meet for another couple weeks. So would then we expect that that everybody would be able to provide comment or whatever in between that time so that we can get that letter sent out before the next meeting so that we do have something to discuss with regards to that short term?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Myron, you have your hand up?
Yeah, and I would hope that someone would start looking into the ordinance issue, maybe give us a report in 2 weeks of what can be done. Can anything be started there initially? Because it seems like that's something at least we should discuss. But if we just don't get to it, we will never do it.
All right, we will do that. So now as we have kind of addressed a process to move forward with our short-term management of the area, and we have some ideas of how to get our public involved, I want to come back with any other organizational or logistical questions that we need to deal with. Is there anything we've missed? Hearing none, let's now talk about that longer term piece. And I want to come back to the fact that, Bobby, you had talked about history being important, and that John Moran is certainly an individual. And I'd also like to recognize Stacy as an individual who know a great deal about the history of the area. And prior to doing any long-term visioning, would you be able to share some deeper history with this group that would guide us as we make our decisions?
Bobby, do you want to say anything?
No, I'll leave this part to you and John, if you would, please.
Okay, I think John has left, unfortunately.
John left the meeting.
Yeah. I believe that anything that there is to be said about the history of the Chippewa City land plat, I've already written a whole book about it. So there's and the story of that continues to grow, which is the nature of history. I believe that I'm in full agreement with Chairman Dishaw that once that piece of land goes into private hands, then that opportunity to honor history and to connect with our ancestors is gone forever. So I think that is an important consideration. I'm not one who I guess likes to debate or argue points or get into the nitty gritty of property lines and things. But I do believe that ancestral history is important in this case. It's not just important for my family or Bobby's or John Moran's family, but all of the Anishinaabe families who have connections to Chippewa City and have ancestors buried in the graveyard. And so I think it is a consideration, and it should have some weight when the group comes together to decide what the long-term approach should be.
Mr. Nelson?
Thank you, Madam Chair. One of the things that I heard during all of this discussion is there's a kind of a distinction between the focus on a particular individual lot or property and that's specific technical history and the history of the area, the history of Chippewa City, the history of the North Shore. And I think it's, you know, I don't, you know, Mr. Homiak was talking about the titles that run all the way back and such like that. I think from what I'm hearing in this group, the history that we're talking about kind of transcends a single lot perspective into the area, the Chippewa City area as kind of the whole, and that's representative of that, and that's just below the church. So it just, to me, it's a little bit more than just looking at one specific lot, and this is the only lot or two that are in a property that's in play or in question that could even be as a part of that. So that's why this is such the focus.
Tyson.
It seems to me that being that this place is the treasure for the public that it is, that the interests of the band and the public, as I see it, are rather aligned. And in my view, the band have been excellent stewards of their lands to the north. And I'm really curious to hear from Bobby what this committee could do to help assist the band with acquiring the last little bit to this Morrison's plat that's still public.
As of right now there, we've met with the Commissioner of Transportation and Dwayne Hill, and we did put in the request for the land. It is a long process. It is if everything went smooth, it would be 12 months. And if it didn't go smooth, it would be 24 months. And it's just a long process. But I think the biggest thing for me is if we do end up acquiring this land, it's to educate people. It's to let them enjoy the beach, the lake. You know, like I said in the beginning, the lake is a gift to all of us. There's getting to be less and less places where you can get to the lake on the North Shore. And for people to go down there and experience it, the power of it is really important to us. You know, we Grand Portage is we lead the pack as a steward to land. You know, we go up against the Minnesota Pollution Control Agency. We go head to head with them on issues that don't meet our standards. So if anyone thinks that the land isn't going to get taken care of, is totally wrong. You know, we want to preserve the land, educate people with the land, and tell our story. You know, what better place to go overlook Lake Superior, where our ancestors fished, canoed, landed, worked up and down the North Shore, than right there, reading a board, reading a big plaque, reading something, looking at that lake, looking at Chippewa City. The history of it is what we go for. And you know, I'm also working with Beaver Bay on the Indian Cemetery down there. It's, you know, people are interested in it, preserving land, preserving history, preserving Indian history. So, you know, anything that people want to do to help us with it, you know, it's not just for us, it's for everybody. So that's what I can say for that.
Maria. Maria, do you have a comment?
Yes, I just want to echo what Bobby has said. And I am a teacher. I do study history, American history. We have to realize that land can't be, well, it can be, according to Westernized society, civilization, it's put a value, a price value on it. And people become so possessive in wanting to own it. That's not the Anishinaabe belief. You cannot own something that Mother Earth has given the original people on this continent. You have to realize that Without water, we can't live. Water sustains all life, and we can't be selfish. We have to be able to share with one another, to educate people. And Bobby was right when he said, this is, the United States as a whole is stolen land. We have to acknowledge that. We have to come together and discuss this and accept responsibility for it, acknowledge it. So land acknowledgement is important. I know they have brought that property along Lake Superior Shore, but you can't take it with you when you die. You have to leave this land in a way that future generations can enjoy it and can live on after us. Don't be selfish, because we need each other. We're in this together. So I understand people want to have their privacy and they've worked hard to get that piece of land, but what good does it do you if you're constantly in battle with neighbors and battle with your community and you don't get to enjoy it? We've got to make sure that this land will be here when we're gone, and it's going to be able to be livable. And like Bobby said, Grand Portage has been an excellent steward of the land. So I think however it goes, we've got to work together to preserve it.
As I've been listening to the group, I've been taking some notes, and some topics have come up repeatedly. Land acknowledgement, education, enjoyment, and respect. And if we could think about these as themes to guide us in our next meetings that are coming up, as we examine this long-term visioning, I think those key characteristics, those adjectives, will help to guide us in making a good decision. Any other comments or remarks that people would like to make this evening? Mr. Homiak.
I wanted to apologize to Chairman Deschamps. Bobby, I'm sitting where Teresa and Joe sat. I know they owned this property. I know they had legal title to it. I know they owned it for 30 years, up until the late 30s, and they probably experienced financial hardships in the 30s, like lots of people did during the Depression years, that led them to lose that property. I wasn't alive in 1937. I came here in 1996. I came here because I love that lake. I came here because I was called to this place. I've tried to take care of it. I've taken care of the property that I think they're your grandparents, aren't they? I'm not sure, but I planted trees on it. I've chased people out of here that didn't honor it. I've made my share of calls to the sheriff because people didn't respect this land. And it's not just about wanting my privacy. I feel that tie to the land, and I feel the tie to the land that you feel. And I don't want this to become a dispute between you and me. I respect you and your request. I understand what the Grand Portage Band has been through. Tyson can read the 110-page abstract and it will mean something different to him. What it meant to me is history. And it teaches all about the history of the hardships that the Grand Portage Band went through in detail. And I could feel their pain. I can't change where I live. All I can do is honor it. And if this committee can come up with ways that limit the access so it's not a 24/7 party palace, which you don't want it to be either. It doesn't matter to me whether the county owns it, a private individual owns it, or the band owns it. What the neighbors are looking for are just a couple of simple things, and that is that the property owners nearby, their yards aren't treated like dog parks, and that it's not a 7x24 party palace. And I think those goals are in alignment with your goals to have this property honored and shared. And I wanted you to hear that from me before we conclude this meeting. And again, I apologize for shaking my head. I'm very sensitive to the whole topic of stolen land. And I read the title, and Tyson could go through it, and he'd come to the same conclusions I did, that there are dubious land transactions that have occurred in the history of this place. It's easy to see. I especially looked for the specific property I sit on, lot 25, because I wanted to know that this property wasn't cheated or stolen from someone. And when I saw your name on it, it became even more important for me to understand that. So I'd welcome an opportunity to sit down with you and with Tyson, who could help us interpret parts of it and go through it and look at that history and understand that history. Because there is, you can't avoid the legal history involved in this place as well. And what the stories that have been passed on in Stacy's book and other books teach us about the place is clearly documented in this stack of papers. And it tells a story. It tells a story of hardship on the North Shore. Anyway, thank you for the opportunity to address Chairman Deschamps.
Thank you, Mr. Homiak. You know, as we discuss this property, we also know that there's many issues around the property that are involved with race. And so I think we need to acknowledge that and recognize that. And one thing I've been thinking about as we've been talking is we talk about Passion Pit, and I just heard, Dave, your comment, Party Palace. And I thought, I don't even like the name Passion Pit. I feel it's so disrespectful to call it that. And I see some nods. I'd like us to think about, before our next meeting, how we can refer to this important place. You know, the kids call it a passion pit, and we know what that's all about. But one important thing we can do for all of us and our community is to refer to this place properly. And being a teacher, I'm giving you all homework. I'd like you to talk amongst each other or reflect individually, but let's have a conversation next time so that on our agenda, it doesn't say Passion Pit agenda, that we rename this place to be respectful and to be acknowledged as it should. And with that, Bobby.
Yeah, I'd just like to thank Dave for the words. We are very passionate about our land. We are passionate about our history. We are passionate about Lake Superior. We are passionate about everything that is on the ground here. And I'd just like to thank him for his words. So, and if he does want to come and sit down and have a conversation with me someday, he's more than welcome. So anybody is, my office is always open.
Thank you. Any other remarks before we close? I know I'm giving you 5 minutes off. I'm letting class out early, but. All right, so our next meeting is Monday, May 10th at 5 o'clock. Your homework is to think about a name for this place. And we have all kinds of letters to write and lists to put together. We'll do all of that. But I want to thank you all for being here and for being honest, because that's how we're all going to grow together, and that's how we're going to do justice to Passion Pit. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Ann.
Thank you. It's nice meeting everyone.
Nice to meet
Good night,
everyone as
everyone.
well.
Nice to meet you.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank
Have
you
great
all for
work.
your
Have a great
Be
night.
good.